the same video that they will be showing in court. By agreement of the parties, this can serve as the video feed, but it may not be broadcast until it is broadcast in court. In other words, the idea is it may be simultaneous with our broadcast and not previous to our broadcast. So thank you.
Your Honor, I assume we should also provide the past. In other words, this also goes to witnesses that have already testified with the conditional examination, so they will have the better video.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
And we can have our jurors when. Return to the courtroom. Mr. Durst is present with Mr. DeGuerin and Mr. Chesnov. Mr. Henderson's at counsel table now for the people. His colleagues are all present as well. At this time, we are returning to the videotaped examination of Detective Michael Struk. And of course, treat this testimony as you would treat the testimony of any live witness. Mr. Henderson, are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor. For the record, we concluded yesterday on day 3 at 1 hour, 33 minutes, 57 seconds. I've gone back about 10 seconds, so we'll start at 1 hour, 33 minutes, 46 seconds.
Mr. Henderson, just for calendaring time, how much more do we have?
A little less than 3 hours.
Seemed reasonable at that point. And Detective, you also said that he sounded like he was ordering a sandwich.
Well, it was kind of nonchalant, that's for sure.
Detective, is there a point where, as an experienced homicide detective, do you look at things in isolation, or as a trained homicide detective, do you look at them together?
Yes.
Do you look at them together?
Yes.
So, Detective, would you agree that very early in this investigation, very early, you've got the spouse, who's the first person you look at anyway, lying about the status of his marriage, lying about when he last saw his wife, lying about having drinks, lying about domestic violence. And at that point, you're telling me that you did not believe that it was going to be a pertinent investigative step to either check the train and the passengers and or to look at his house?
I'll go back to the train. I still don't think the train was something at that point that we would have entertained based on when it was done and by whom. The second part of your question was, I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question? Was the train and what?
And the search of the house.
And the search of the house.
At that point, with that information that you had.
Sitting here today, it would seem worthy to have been considered, but it doesn't mean it wasn't. It could have been considered, and again, for different reasons, it was thought to not go forward on it. The philosophy I know in team meetings with the boss was not to declare him a full-blown suspect for a while because we had no crime scene, we had no body. So we wanted, at least I know the boss said at that time, we'll take heat on this, but let's not declare him anything, and let's just hope something falls into place. And that's pretty much how we proceeded for quite a while.
Was there anything preventing you, Detective, from asking Bob Durst for permission to search the South Salem house?
There was nothing preventing me, using that term, but it was...
Detective. Let me go back to finish up with the earrings. Detective, how do you know that Bob Durst didn't put those earrings back in the house after he killed Kathie? How do you know that didn't happen?
I don't know.
Mr. Durst reported to you that Kathie was wearing those earrings, correct? That were found at the house, is that right?
I don't remember, but...
For detective, I can show you the missing persons report again, and your report where you write down that Kathie was wearing diamond earrings at the time.
Okay.
Do you recall that now?
Now,
So, detective, you were called then by Gerald E. McInerney and by Mary Hughes, one or both of them. You were called by them to tell you that they had found those earrings inside of the Riverside Drive apartment. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Detective, isn't another way to look at that as a homicide detective? Oh my God. He reported she was wearing these when he last saw her. They should be with her. Now they're back in the house.
Well, no, if she came home, then that would justify or give reason as to why they were in the house.
If she came home and you were dependent, detective, upon the defendant's version of what occurred, correct?
Yeah.
Is it fair to say, detective, that for the most part, based on the information you already had at that point regarding the lies Mr. Durst had told you, that as a responsible detective, that you should have looked with absolute skepticism at anything Mr. Durst had to tell you?
I was always skeptical.
So, is the answer to my question, you agree that given the lies you had caught Mr. Durst in, that you had, by that time, you should have looked at any statement he gave you with skepticism?
Well, that's fair.
So, detective, I'm asking you, did you get the school records from Einstein and check on that? Although she was failing.
I remember getting records.
You were asked questions by Mr. DeGuerin about Kathie's applications, the ones that she had completed and not completed. Did you recall that?
Not really.
Mr. DeGuerin at one point asked you about her general medicine history. Are you aware as to whether or not she passed that?
I don't know.
If I were to tell you as an offer of proof that the records indicate that she passed with a good to quote, very good evaluation.
Sitting here today, that would be surprising because my recollection in speaking to some of these doctors was that she did have difficulties. But I'm not refuting what you just told me. It's very likely. Yeah.
Are you aware that Kathie Durst passed her radiology rotation on January 24th, 1982, a week before she disappeared, and that she passed with a very good evaluation?
No, sir.
Well, detective, if you're examining what Kathie Durst's mental state was, wouldn't it have been important to find out, hey, how did she do on her last rotation? What was her current mental state? Aren't those things that you should have done?
Well, I had heard varying comments from these different physicians that she was doing well, and then some guys saying she wasn't doing well. I remember getting the records, the medical records and whatnot, but the contents of the medical records really, at this point, I have no idea what they contain.
Detective, can you review your documentation? Can you tell me when it was that you obtained Kathie's academic records from Albert Einstein? Do you know if you did that?
Do I know if I did it?
Yes.
I believe we did get medical records or academic records. I'm not sure. I'm answering you as I'm not sure.
So, detective, you understand the difference between a medical record, somebody getting treatment in a hospital,
Yes.
and an academic record, how they're doing in school. You understand the difference, correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm not asking you whether you did it or not. So, don't give me an answer of, I don't know if I did. It's not what I'm asking you. I'm saying, you are aware that Bob Durst is telling you Kathie's flunking out of medical school, correct?
Well, there was comments about that.
And you are aware that Susan Berman, Bob's close friend, is telling you Kathie's flunking out of medical school, correct?
Okay.
Is that correct, yes or no?
I'll say yes.
So, Detective, given that you have Bob Durst and Susan Berman telling you that Kathie's flunking out of medical school, and that they are both using that as the motivation for her voluntarily taking off, you agree that's what they were doing and suggesting, correct?
That's possible, sure.
Detective, I'm not asking what's possible. Do you agree or disagree? Bob Durst was telling you Kathie was doing really poor in medical school and that she voluntarily took off.
He had said that she was failing, and other people said she was failing, and some people said no, she wasn't failing. I think there was a notation somewhere in my notes perhaps that someone said that she would have passed.
Detective, listen to my question. I'm asking you this. Mr. Durst is telling you that Kathie Durst is failing in the context of she has voluntarily taken off. That is how you took his statement, correct?
Yeah, I'm sitting here today, yeah.
No, Detective, not sitting here today. When he told you at the time, he told you, he went out of his way to say Kathie's failing, she's not doing well in medical school, she's going to flunk out. And he suggested to you that because of that, she voluntarily took off. Isn't that correct?
You may have told me that.
And isn't it true, Detective, that Susan Berman suggested the same thing when you spoke to her?
I believe so, yes.
So, Detective, given that that's what they're saying, wouldn't a competent investigator have gone and said, you know what, I'm going to get the answer, and I'm going to look through her academic records and find out what the truth is?
It would have been a good thing to do.
So, listen to the question and answer only the question. You may feel that it deserves an explanation, or perhaps it can't be answered, yes or no, but answer only the question. Just listen to the question and only answer the question posed to you. As you can. I ask again.
Detective, do you agree that given what you were being told at the time, back in 1982, that it was a mistake, however well-intentioned, for you not to have gone and examined those academic records?
I wish we did.
Was it a mistake, Detective? Yes or no?
I don't think so. Oh, never mind.
So the answer is no. Is that you're saying no?
Yes.
Right. Okay, let's continue. Did you ascertain what Kathie was supposed to be doing on the Monday she disappeared?
I don't believe it.
Detective, wouldn't it have been of paramount importance for you to have determined where she was supposed to be on Monday morning?
I would assume yes.
Do you know was she supposed to be in class that day?
I don't recall what class she was supposed to be in that day.
Is your recollection that she was supposed to be in some medical school class that day? Is that your recollection?
My recollection is she had called in sick not to attend some course.
Okay. So she was supposed to attend a course, and she called in sick, is that correct?
That's what I recall.
Detective, wouldn't it have been the proper and competent thing for you to have gone and checked with whatever course Kathie was supposed to attend, and check with faculty and students who might have been in that class?
And what would that have been?
Detective, you just responded a moment ago. Well, what would that have proven or shown, whatever your exact words were? Do you recall that?
Yes.
Detective, would you agree that unless you go and you do that investigation, we'll never know? Do you agree?
You know, I'm reluctant to answer because if I don't give a yes or no answer, I seem to get, it comes back at me.
Well, it may be unpleasant or uncomfortable for you. I do insist that the attorney ultimately respect your dignity.
I certainly do respect counsel.
So, with that being given, you may feel uncomfortable, and you may see counsel react in some way that seems to suggest disapproval, and attorneys will do that. But your obligation is simply to listen to the question and answer it as best you can. If you can't answer, that's your answer as well.
Well, you can say yes to that.
Detective, do you know what your medical school Kathie she disappeared?
Excuse me, repeat.
Do you know what your medical school Kathie was in at the time she disappeared?
I think she was a senior.
Her fourth year, last year of medical school, correct?
Yes.
She was about ready to graduate, correct?
That's what I understand.
Do you know that fourth year medical students at Einstein did not have classes at that time? They did rotations. Did you know that?
I don't think so.
Detective, isn't that something that a competent detective on this case should know about where the victim was and what she was doing at the time she disappeared?
Well, if I had a medical school background, I probably would have known. But I don't know my way how to navigate around the medical school at that point, when that case first came in. I'm speaking to the staff, the deans, and whatever. I'm trying to learn at that point what course I should go look at or whatever. I can't. I'm doing the best I can. This is a long time ago.
So, Detective, it didn't occur to you to ask somebody at the medical school or review Kathie's medical records to say, listen, her academic records, where was she supposed to be on the morning of February 1st? You didn't do that, did you?
No.
Detective, would you agree that was a mistake?
Every omission is not a mistake. You can only do so many things on a case.
So, Detective, you had at this point in time, you have 10 different detectives. You're going and you're talking to the dean, and you're now basically saying, it would appear that, you know what, I couldn't do everything, I didn't have the time. Is that what your answer is?
But it could be.
So, Detective, you're saying that you didn't believe it was a priority to go and find out where was Kathie supposed to be that morning, Monday morning. Who saw her? Who might have talked to her? That did not occur to you as something that needed to be done.
If she called in sick, who would I speak to?
During rotation, she was scheduled to start on Monday, February 1st.
That was it.
Detective, as a homicide detective with 20 years approximately, how do you think, if I said to you, you know what, Detective, gosh, if only there was a way that I could find out what rotation Kathie is supposed to be doing. Do you think you need to be an expert on medical schools to find that out as a detective?
No, I don't think you had to be an expert, but if you had a to-do list with 1,000 things on it, you pick at the ones that are going to get you where you want to go. And sitting here today, speaking to students in her rotation that she called in sick for or whatnot, I don't know where that was in the priority list that we worked off.
Did you ever, is there any to-do list that you have where it's even written down as something for you to do?
Oh, I'm sure at the time there was.
Well, Detective, you just went through all your records. Please tell me if you recall seeing a to-do list that mentioned contacting Kathie's fellow students and faculty at her rotation.
If you're working off a to-do list and you accomplish those things that wind up in the chronology,
I'm going to mark, this is previous. This was defense. Defense P87. This was marked as exhibit.
All right, well, you can engineer that during our break.
Okay.
We're going to take a break at 3:15. Please step down and do a discussion testimony of any other witness. If anybody else is fine. In order to be honest, we're back in session. You may resume your process.
Thank you. Detective, did you know that Kathie Durst was supposed to start a rotation in ambulatory pediatrics starting on Monday, February 1st?
No, sir.
Do you know who Kathie was supposed to report to at that rotation?
No, sir.
Would it have been your habit and custom to have contacted such an individual if you had ascertained who they were?
Probably so.
And would you agree that there's no indication that you contacted any such person?
I don't think so.
Meaning you would agree?
Yes, sir.
Do you know whether there were other medical students who were also supposed to be starting that rotation?
I don't know, sir.
And would you agree that you and your team did not make any effort to attempt to contact them?
Sitting here today, I don't think so. That's all I'll say no.
And you got a chance to review your notebook. You would agree that you did not find any indication in the notebook that you in fact contacted either the physician in charge of rotation or any fellow medical students who were going to be enrolled in it.
Yes.
Detective, when you originally interviewed Mr. Durst, he told you that Kathie would stay on the premises at the medical school, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he was telling you that in reference to what she was doing between the Monday that she was reported and that he, in essence, discovered she was missing, and the Friday when he reported her missing, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you verify that, in fact, Kathie Durst was on a rotation where she would have been what we would call in-house, staying overnight?
No.
Detective, are you aware that Kathie was actually doing an outpatient clinic that week and that she would not have been staying at the hospital?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Is that information that you think would have been pertinent to your investigation?
Sitting here today probably would have helped.
I want to talk about what's been referred to as the party at Gilberta's, or the dinner at Gilberta's. You know what I'm referring to?
Possibly.
The January 31st dinner/party at Gilberta's on that Sunday.
Yes.
So I'm going to just call it the party or the dinner, but you know what I'm talking about, correct?
Yes.
Did you attempt to locate anyone who was with Kathie at Gilberta's house just prior to her disappearance?
I don't know if I'd done that directly or that came to me later on through pieces. It's evasive. I'm just trying to say I don't remember. I recall that she had attended it was told to me that she attended a dinner or something with at Gilberta's house or something, and they had been drinking wine or something. But who was there? I don't recall right now sitting here.
My question is not what you remember now. My question is, do you think it would have been important to have tried to find out who was at that gathering so you could interview them and find out if there was any pertinent information in that?
I'd go along with that, yes.
And would you agree, Detective, that there is no record in any of your reports, notes, or any of your team members that was done?
Correct.
Did you speak to Gilberta's sisters at all?
Who?
Gilberta's sisters.
I don't know what you mean.
How about her brother-in-law?
Didn't know that either.
Would it surprise you that they were present at that dinner?
I mean, yeah, I guess. I mean,
Detective, you were told very early on in the case that Kathie had said to Gilberta, in essence, before she left, Gilberta, if something happens to me, Bob did it, correct?
I recall that.
You were also told early on in the investigation that Kathie had a phone call with an individual conversation with Peter Schwartz, correct?
I recall the name, yes.
And do you also agree that you were told that that call involved Kathie, in essence, being told that Peter Schwartz was not going to pursue his assault claims against Bob Durst?
I recall there was an incident where he kicked him or did something like that. So I'm going to say yes, that occurred.
Do you recall also being told that while Kathie was at Gilberta's, that there was at least one phone call where it was reported to you that Kathie and Bob Durst were arguing on the phone?
I'm not going to say it didn't happen, I just don't recall sitting here today.
If it's in your notes, though, Detective, then that would mean you were aware of it, correct?
Correct.
And if it's not in your notes, that would mean you were not aware of it, correct?
If it's not in my notes, obviously it wasn't told to me.
Because, Detective, certainly you're going to have reported in your notes if somebody told you that Kathie's having an argument with Bob shortly before she turns up missing, you would have believed that was pertinent, correct?
Yes, sir?
All right, I want to talk a minute about Bob Durst's domestic violence history. Did you make the following comment to Kathie Durst's friends about Bob Durst's violent tendencies? And the quote is, "It's not fact. You can't just run off and indict somebody because you know there's been a push or a slap or a punch or a bad relationship." Unquote.
Did I make that statement?
Yes.
It's possible, yes.
Well, you want me to, this is a statement that you were repeating, that you made to Kathie's friends, to the show Vanished, a cold case of Kathie Durst, investigation into the mysterious disappearance of Kathie Durst, 72501, LADA 089-835-098.
Excuse me, repeat that number, LADA.
LADA number 098-835-098-849. Does that refresh your recollection?
Perhaps, yeah.
Well, Detective, does that statement, Detective, does that sound like the statement, it's not fact, you can't just run off and indict somebody because you know there's been a push or a slap or a punch or a bad relationship, unquote. Does that sound like the words that you would use?
If I wrote it, then I said it.
Well, so this is what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
As you sit here today, do you have a memory of saying that?
Not really. I'm not denying it, but I have a memory of it.
Okay, so the next question I'm asking is, if you don't specifically remember it, there are some things, so for instance, if somebody said, hey John, did you use the word multifarious? I would go, you know what, that is not a word that I would that's not my word. So you could say, no, you know what, listening to those words, that's not how I talk. Or you could say, you know what, that sounds like the way I talk. And you further might say, you know what, that sounds like the way I felt. So my question is, do those words sound like the way you speak?
It very well could be.
And do those words communicate the way you felt?
Well, yes.
Okay. Do you believe, Detective, so you said it's not fact, you can't just run off and indict somebody because you know there's been a push or a slap or a punch or a bad relationship. Do you believe that you adequately investigated Bob Durst's history of domestic violence?
I know we did DCI check on him.
Do you know what kind of check?
DCI. Yeah, the criminal records check. That was done. As to how in depth we did at that time domestic violence, I don't recall.
Did you go back to Kathie's family and did you ask specific questions about Bob Durst's history of domestic violence?
Well, they always said that their relationship wasn't good, and that there was domestic violence in it, and that was part of their marriage, and that's why they had split up, and so.
Do you know who Ann Anderson and Kevin Doyle are? Anderson is S-E-N.
The names right now don't mean anything to me.
They were the individuals who lived in the penthouse on the same floor as the Durst. Do you remember them now?
Yes.
You didn't personally interview them, correct?
I think Detective Berry.
But you were made aware of an incident of where Kathie Durst was pounding on the Doyle's balcony in the middle of the night, correct?
I'm aware of it.
And in fact, were you aware that Ann Doyle related that Kathie Durst had stated to her that Bob had threatened her with a gun?
I don't remember the specifics of everything that was said. That's very possible that was contained within Marion's report, if that's what's in there.
I'm going to put it up here. PA, please, if you can look. This is Detective Jim Marion's report of his February 10th, 1982 interview with the Doyles. By the way, Jim Marion was one of the detectives that was working with you, correct?
He did a little bit with us early on.
Is this a previous exhibit or is this one I'm doing?
Previous. That's why people say it.
Thank you.
And when you say he did a little work, he was helping you out. You were the lead detective, and he was following up on different tasks that you had to do, correct?
Apparently the borough office had sent Jim up and a couple other fellows.
You were familiar with all of the reports that were generated by NYPD in this case, correct?
That would be fair to say.
What's that?
I said that would be fair to say.
All right, so Detective, I'd like you to take a look, and I'd like you to read the I can't see it. Yeah, can you read what has been highlighted?
Ann stated that sometime during the latter part of something, or the beginning of October.
Is that September?
It could be.
Okay.
September or the beginning of October. Catherine did leave her apartment via the bedroom window, PJs, and walked around the outside balcony to Ann's bedroom window and was crying. Ann let her in. Catherine stated that Bob had beat her and that he wants to kill her. She further stated that he had a gun and was afraid of being shot.
Detective, you're aware of this.
Yes.
And in fact, would you agree that you found out about this when this interview was conducted on February 10th, 1982, correct?
Well, I guess we're shortly thereafter, sure.
As a homicide detective, would you characterize what was described here as severe domestic violence?
Yes.
And would you classify it as conduct that would lead you to believe that Mr. Durst might be responsible for the disappearance of his wife?
Correct.
And you knew this on February 10th, 5 days into the investigation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you aware of an incident that happened at a Christmas party at Kathie Durst's mother's house? Are you aware of that incident?
Could you be more specific?
Let me see if this refreshes your recollection. This is going to be, I need to mark this, or we're going to mark this as people's next door, Your Honor.
It will be 102 and 102A. Thank you.
Okay.
Something happened with the morning.
Was that the Struk incident?
No. See if this refreshes your recollection.
I knew that she was doing bad in school and gotten a whole bunch of incompletes, and I was under the impression that she wasn't sure she was going to graduate. This is close. witnesses that we agree on how long we're going to stay. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, we could always do a negotiation. When the time was up, I was ready to leave. Seen the story about the hair 2 different ways. One way I drag her out of the house by her hair. The other way I grab her hair.
Detective, does that refresh your recollection? Did you be able to finish or not?
As long as I'm following this, Mr. Durst seems to be the person commenting on the film, and this must be from the documentary.
Since my exhibit.
Will you give me a tag for it so I can label it?
Yeah. Having seen this, does this refresh your recollection about having heard about this event at the time? Does this now refresh your recollection about having heard at the time from Kathie's family about an incident of domestic violence that happened in prison?
This I've never seen, but I had heard a host of things that had gone on between them with respect to fighting or domestic violence. So the Christmas episode or incident, I very possibly heard. I mean,
Would you,
there were many, sir.
would you agree, Detective, that you did not specifically go out and interview and ask witnesses directly about physical violence between Bob and Kathie? That if a witness volunteered such information, you documented it, but you didn't go out and specifically kind of investigate, hey, how much domestic violence was this guy involved in? Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement.
When I say the name Eleanor Schwank, E-L-E-A-N-O-R, last name S-C-H-W-A-N-K, do you know who that is?
She's a friend of Kathie's and an attorney.
Are you thinking of Ellen Schwartz?
Well, anyway, Schwank sounds familiar.
I'm sorry.
Strauss?
Yeah, I'm thinking of Ellen Strauss. Okay. Too many Strausses, Schwartzes, etc. Okay. Eleanor Schwank, is that someone, a name that you recognize from the original investigation?
I recall the name.
And Detective, would you agree that you did not speak to her during your original investigation?
I don't remember that. I'm not saying I didn't. It just.
Yeah. I want you to assume for a moment that there's no indication in your spiral notebook or any DD5 report or any problem that you or anyone part of your investigative team ever spoke to Eleanor Schwank. Do you agree that if that is in fact correct, then you guys didn't speak to her?
That would be fair to say.
And do you know if you attempted to find her,
I'm sorry.
do you know if you or your people attempted to locate her?
Because I don't remember the significance of what Ms. Schwank would have added. Sitting here today, I don't know where I'm answering that.
Detective, are you aware of a June 3rd, 1982 article in the New York Post where Eleanor Schwank discussed how Kathie Durst had told her about a beating in November of 1981 where Eleanor said she told Kathie to go to the hospital?
Okay. I don't recall the Post article. However, there was where we obtained medical records in the hospital from an assault. I don't know if that's the same matter you're referring to.
So, Detective, this would be my question. If the New York Post is reporting that there's a witness who has first-hand knowledge of a beating by a suspect of his missing wife where she had to go to the hospital, Detective, how can you not have followed up on that?
Like I said, I don't recall the article. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but I do know that we went and we obtained records from a hospital where she had gone from an assault.
Detective, in high-profile cases like this is a high-profile case, correct?
Is it?
This was in 1982.
That's right.
An extremely high-profile case, correct?
Yes.
And it was widely covered in the media, correct?
Yes.
And as a detective, isn't it your responsibility to be making sure that you are monitoring either yourself or someone in your direction, the local newspapers, to see if they are uncovering evidence that you're not.
Well, yes, that would certainly be something that we would do. But, you know, again, early on in a case like this, we get a lot of stuff coming at you. I think it's important. I'm not playing down with what you're suggesting. I just don't.
I want to put up people who want to market as 103. Have you ever seen this before? That's the cover to the New York Post, as you can see from June 3rd, 1982, with a cover story about Bob Durst's wife's secret agony, beauty tortured by her husband's love affair with Mia Farrow's sister. And this is an article that goes on for several pages. My question is, you would agree, Detective, there's no way that this article, you agree, would definitely have been pointed out to you or your team, correct?
I would think so.
Is it easier for you, Detective, to look at it here or look at it on the screen?
I'd like to look at that.
Okay.
So what was the date of the article?
June 3rd, it's dated June 3rd, 1982.
So I take this section to be a series of leads that you suggest you do not follow up on, and so this is not for the purpose of proving that any lead is true, but it's explaining the action of either.
Is this which particular is this now?
This is 103.
How many pages is 103?
4.
Thank you.
So, have you had a chance to examine that?
Okay. I recall numerous paper articles that came out on the case that different writers would follow up. This particular one doesn't ring a bell. I don't think I was working during that time. I think I was still convalescing from the surgery.
You weren't working in June?
June, I think.
June 3rd of 1982?
I don't think so.
Well, Detective, one moment. If you were not working, was the case still assigned to you?
Well, it stays with me, but supposedly the team should pick up or add to it.
So you agree that even if you were not yourself working, you would have been advised of this information when you got back, correct?
Well, hopefully.
And you would agree, Detective, reading this, that Eleanor Swank is somebody you would clearly want to interview, correct?
That's what it said, yes.
And then it says that Eleanor also said that Kathie told her that she had been severely beaten the previous November of 1981. Is it your position that this is the first time that you are being made aware of the existence of this information from Eleanor Swank?
No, I'm not denying that. There was a significant amount of domestic violence issues that were brought to us. I assume this was one of them.
So your position is you agree that should have been followed up on and investigated?
Correct.
Okay, let me continue. Are you aware that Kathie Durst sought treatment at Jacobi Hospital for injuries to her face the same month she disappeared, January of 1982?
It's the same month. In January of 80.
Yes, are you aware that earlier in January of 82, the same month Kathie disappeared, she disappeared January 31st, are you aware that she sought treatment at Jacobi Hospital for injuries to her face? Are you aware of that?
I believe I am.
In fact, you were aware of that back in 1982 because those are records that you got, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Detective, you would agree that in getting those records, the first thing that you're going to do when you get a record like that is you're going to call the treating physician who treated her, correct?
Well, it would have been good if we had done that. Why it was not done, I don't know.
So Detective, you are aware that in fact, neither you nor your people ever documented having contacted Dr. Hain, H-E-I-N, the physician who treated Kathie. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would agree, but was that the records that came from Jacoby?
Yes,
yeah.
Detective.
I don't know.
And you would agree, Detective, that you cannot give an explanation as to why you would not have interviewed the doctor who treated Kathie the month she disappeared for injuries to her face.
No, I don't.
How many of Kathie Durst's medical school classmates did you speak to?
I believe there were several.
Is it fair to say it was less than 10?
It could be.
Detective, this is probably the highest profile case of your career, is that correct? So you think the opera case was a bigger case?
I think it was at the time because it has a lot of national and international coverage.
So was this either the first or second biggest case of your career?
This was pretty high up there. I've got a little bit involved with the John Lennon murder as well, but this was certainly a remarkable case. In fact, that it got a lot of media.
And it was a nobody case, correct?
Right.
You said before, as far as you knew, you did not handle any other nobody cases that you could remember, correct?
That's correct.
So my question to you would be that if you had this medical student disappearing off the face of the earth, Detective, wouldn't you have attempted, you and your people, to contact every person in that medical school that you could find who might have information to give you?
There's always restrictions as to how much work we could do on a case at a given time. So I wish we spoke to everybody. There's always a priority as to what our manpower is and how many people we can speak to. It certainly would have been worthy if we could speak to every single person that came across. Sitting here, that would be my view.
Detective, was there ever a point in time where you went to your supervisors and you said, listen, there are all these investigative avenues that I want to follow up, where they told you, you know what, Detective Struk, we're not going to give you the manpower?
No, nobody ever said that.
Well, Detective, so when you're saying that there were manpower restrictions, etc., you never asked, correct?
I don't. It's hard for me to say what I asked for at that time. We had numerous team meetings, and assignments were delegated, and you always work off a priority as to what is important. There's no denying there was a numerous amount of domestic violence issues that have been in their history. I think that perhaps we were seeking more towards finding her and doing things like that. But there was a lot of people involved. I mean, if 10 people tell you that the marriage was bad and that there was domestic violence, I don't know if 20 would change it that much more. I'm not minimizing that, but there just comes a point where you just can't follow every single lead.
But Detective, you're trying to figure out where Kathie Durst is, and you're not contacting the medical students that she was going to school with, who might be able to provide you that information. Do you agree?
My recollection is we spoke to those who were told to us were very good friends of us.
Do you know who Dr. Peter Halperin is? Halperin.
Not offhand.
Would you agree, Detective, that there's no indication that you ever spoke to Dr. Peter Halperin or anyone on your team during your investigation?
I don't know.
That's a name you don't recognize, correct?
And I'm not sitting here today, no.
So if I told you, Detective, that having looked through your reports, your chronicle, and your notes, there was no mention of Dr. Peter Halford, does that mean to you that, you know what, we didn't talk to him?
That would be a likely, yeah.
I want to ask you if the following information would have affected the course of your investigation. I want you to assume that Dr. Halford, when he was eventually interviewed, reported that within 2 weeks prior to Kathie's disappearance, Kathie called him on the phone. That Dr. Halford's wife, who was not on the phone, could hear his side of the conversation. That he reported that Kathie sounded, quote, frightened, unquote, and petrified, quote, petrified, unquote. That she said that she was frightened of her husband and was irrationally jealous, and related that he had beaten and kicked a male numerous times in the face. He further reported that Kathie Durst told him, quote, I'm frightened of my husband, unquote. He's becoming more, unquote, he's becoming more violent and more unstable, unquote. He reported that he told Kathie to leave her husband immediately, but she said she could not do it. He asked her to explain, and she said that if she leaves, it will interfere with her divorce settlement. He reports that he told her she needed to get away and offered to come let her stay with him and his wife. Were you aware of this information at all? Okay. So, Detective, do you agree that had you been given that information during your investigation, that certainly would have been pertinent?
Well, yes.
Detective, you have noted that during your conversation with Mr. Durst, he talked about looking at land parcels in Connecticut. Is that correct?
Yes.
How well did you go back and investigate the activities that Bob Durst said that he did when Kathie allegedly disappeared? So, meaning, he gave you an extensive timeline of his activities between Monday and coming in to the 20th precinct on Friday. Is that correct?
Yes.
In fact, he went literally, in some cases, almost hour by hour of discussing what he did. I got up that morning, we asked time, and then I did this, correct?
I believe he did.
Do you recall that he told you that on Tuesday, February 2nd, 1982, he was in Connecticut looking at land and buildings?
I recall that, yes.
Did you ask him for more specific information about these buildings?
I don't believe I did.
Did you ask him, hey, what parcels would you be looking at in Connecticut and why?
I don't know why I did not ask him that. He's a real estate individual. How many parcels he would have looked at, I don't know. I recorded what he told me, and
did you tell Andrew Jarecki in your interview with him on 5/27/2011 on page 107, lines 16 through 18? I guess looking back on it today, I should have held his foot to the fire of which parcels did you look at. Do you recall telling Andrew Jarecki that?
I probably did.
And would you agree that that was acknowledging, you know what, that you made a mistake in not looking at that issue more carefully?
Well, it certainly, after all these years, and other bits and pieces that I've learned over the years about Mr. Durst's activities, that in hindsight, that would have been good to do.
Detective, at the time that Mr. Durst is telling you about what he did happen, shortly thereafter, when you interview the mayors, you're going to discover, without question, that he has lied to you about where he was, correct?
That would be fair to say, yeah.
So, did you go to the Durst organization and inquire, hey, you know what did Bob Durst, what was his position? Did he look at land parcels in Connecticut? Did you do that?
No.
Why?
Going to his management company and to ask them that, it would have it would have been contrary to what our I guess you could say our strategy was at the time, was to try to work around him and behind him, and not to disclose to him that we had as much interest in him as we did. That's why he was never officially declared a suspect.
It's now coming up on 4:30. So we're going to resume tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Department 81 is adjourned.
Your Honor, we finished day 3. I can start day 4.
Day 3, and now day 4.
I think this is the last day, correct?
Last day.
Witness may resume the witness stand. Detective Struk, please come forward. Mr. Struk, you remain under oath. You may continue your cross-examination, Mr. Williams.
Detective, I was asking you yesterday about the defendant's claim that he was looking at parcels in Connecticut. Do you remember that line of questioning? Yes. I don't think you answered this question. I did let me know. Did you, I think you said you did not contact anybody at your organization, but I don't think you said as to why.
Well, I think that was all part of our strategy at the time to stay aside from Mr. Durst, to act in the periphery of him at that point, because at that point he had not lawyered up, and this was something that we didn't want to take place.
Would you agree, Detective, that the best information regarding whether or not Mr. Durst looked at parcels in Connecticut regarding his work with the Durst organization would have been in the purview of some of your lawyer? Would you agree?
Yes.
Do you recall previously having stated that finding out the information that Mr. Durst told you that he was in Connecticut on that Tuesday, do you recall saying that that was a moment where, quote, I thought it was starting to fall into place?
I never said that.
Do you recall?
I don't specifically recall, but it's very possible.
Do you recall Mr. Durst telling you what he had done, allegedly on Monday morning, February 1st?
I think that's reflected in my memo book.
And I'm going to tell you, it was documented that Mr. Durst told you that he had gone to the vet on Monday morning to get his dog. Is that refresh your recollection?
I believe I reported that the book, yeah.
Can you tell me what the veterinarian said when you went back to verify this information?
I don't know if I spoke to the vet. I don't know if anybody spoke to the vet from the team at that point.
Detective Struk, can you explain how on the morning immediately after Kathie Durst is missing, and Mr. Durst is telling you where he was that morning, can you explain why you would not have verified that information?
Mr. Miller, sitting here today, I don't recall a lot of what decisions we made or did or did not do at the time.
So Mr. Durst has told you that he has taken to the train on Sunday night. He has told you that he's come back and had drinks with the mayors. You've caught him very early on in that lie that it wasn't true. And he's also told you Monday morning, when certainly evidence suggests he could have been disposing of a body, you don't verify his alibi. And I'm trying to understand how that could be.
I don't mean to be difficult, but it keeps coming back to the fact of us believing that Cooperman had received a phone call, so that she was there at that point. And why pursue what could be a red herring at that point?
Well, would you agree, it wouldn't be a red herring, it would be verifying what Mr. Durst told you and potentially uncovering information that might have caused you to cast doubt on what Dr. Cooperman was telling you. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree. There's probably a lot of things that could have been done at that point, but sitting here today, I don't know exactly what the team had decided on.
Do you recall on direct examination either answering yourself or agreeing with Mr. DeGuerin that you asked for extra manpower on the case and they gave it to you?
Early on, of course.
And so you would agree, Detective, that at the time that I'm asking you about these things that were not done early on in the investigation, you would agree you cannot say it was because of a lack of manpower. Agreed?
Well, no, I can't, but when the other manpower came, they were doing canvassing, they were doing other chores, I think, which was reflected in the chronology.
Detective, but you're leading the investigation. And would you agree that as the leader of that investigation, you had resources available to, for instance, if you wanted, have somebody go back and talk to the trained people?
The trained people? No.
Yes.
You mean the Gilberta thing? Yeah, again, Mr. Lewin, I can't tell you exactly why we did everything that we did. In hindsight, there's probably 1,000 things that I wish we would have done.
Detective Cannon, I'm just asking you to listen to my question. I'm not asking you why you didn't do it. I'm just telling you if you can just answer this question. It's a simple question.
Okay.
The decisions you made about what was done early in the investigation were not made because of a lack of manpower. Correct or incorrect?
Well, that would certainly be much before, yes.
Well, and in fact, Detective, you testified previously that you never asked the supervisors for any additional manpower that they did not provide.
Usually the team is in coordination with the supervisors and assignments are designated through the command structure, whatever bosses were there on at the early stages of the case. I could recommend places that I would like guys to go, but I don't have the ultimate say in it.
Detective, is there any indication in any of your reports, your chronology, your notes, that there were things that you wanted to have done, which either the NYPD did not provide resources for, or which they turned you down in your request? Did you ever document anything like that?
No, because I was never denied anything or refused in that context, no.
So, Detective, is it fair to say that you were told on this case that this was a high priority case, correct?
I was told by whom, when?
Well, you were, I believe you testified previously that this was a case that the mayor's office was aware of.
I don't know if that's a fact, but obviously as the case went forward, it started to generate a great deal of publicity. Sure.
And you previously testified that the upper echelons of your department did nothing but facilitate you to do the investigation you want to do on this case, correct?
I'm sitting here today, I would think that everything that we needed at that point, and we asked for it, we probably would have gotten it. Answer to your question.
But that's right. Is it fair to say that as you sit here, and again, if you don't agree with what I'm saying, you tell me I don't agree with it. This is my question. Would you agree that what's happening with the questions that I've been asking is that you are now realizing that, you know what, there are a lot of things that should have been done, and we didn't do them. Not that we didn't intentionally not do something, but in the end, there were a lot of things in this case that you're being presented with where you're having to respond, you know what, we should have done that. Would you agree?
Well, absolutely. There are always things that we wish you had done.
Well, and again, when you said there's always things you consider about any case, would you agree that I mentioned probably already close to 20 different things that were important, specific to this case, that did not get done, that you now believe should have been done?
Sitting here today, everything is important when you put it that way. But you would address things according to priority at that time.
I want to ask you, there previously have been comments in the media about political pressure exerted allegedly by the Durst family to shut this investigation down or to control where it went. Did you ever experience any of that?
No.
When I say the name Ed Wright, do you know who that is?
Yes.
Who is Ed Wright?
And right, I think it was a PI hired by Mr. Durst or his attorneys.
And by PI, you mean private investigator?
Yes.
And do you know Ed Wright to have been a former member of the NYPD?
That's my understanding, yes.
It's fair to say that Ed Wright is older than you are, correct?
I don't know.
But do you know him personally? Have you ever met him?
No.
Are you sure you never met him?
I don't think so.
Let's play MS 015 52711 LADA 154.
So this is 105, 105A? Yes, please. Okay.
This guy Ed Wright, the private investigator, he was hired by I've heard different stories about him. Do you remember having any contact with him or hearing about him?
I'm pretty sure he came up to the detective squad one day and was, I guess, attempting to capture some information, I guess. And but you know, I certainly wasn't about to reveal anything that was going to assist their side of the everything else was better. And then if I had to guess, I probably was closer to him and respectful, but I don't think he walked away with learning much.
Does that refresh your recollection as to whether or not you ever met Mr. Wright?
I remember saying this, but it doesn't indicate that I really spoke to him.
Okay, I just want to clarify. It could be taken when you say, I probably was cordial to him. There's two possibilities there. You're saying how you would have treated him if you'd met him, or you're saying, you know what, I met him, this is how I treated him. As you sit here right now, do you remember which it is?
My guess right now sitting here is that he probably came in sniffing, and I either didn't speak to him or he went away on his own. I certainly wasn't going to give anything to any PI on the case.
And you knew that he was working for Mr. Durst's attorney, Dick's competitor, correct?
I would guess at some point, yes.
Did you have any direct contact that you can recall at any point with Ed Wright during your investigation?
I do not think so.
Now, at some point, did you come into possession of reports that appeared to be written by Ed Wright regarding his work on the Durst case in 1982?
Yes.
Now, I want to be very clear. I don't want you to talk about the contents of those reports, all right? So it's very important to listen to my questions carefully to understand. Do you remember how it was that you came into possession of those documents?
I recall first learning about them.
I'm sorry?
I said, I do recall when I first learned about them, yes.
So if you can, just tell us, so how was it you learned about them or came into possession of them?
I arrived at the squad one day and somebody said, look what we got. And from that, it was read, and then we had pretty much decided that it would just go for, put it on the back burner. Obviously considered to be a privilege, and toyed with it.
Your Honor, it's almost a noon hour. Pause day 4 at 14 minutes and 31 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. We'll resume at 1:30. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. And 1:30 p.m. we'll see you back. And we have a juror who has an appointment coming up, and that will be fine. We'll recess early on that day. All right? You're welcome. The juror coming back in. And there you go. Yes.
Your Honor, we were told that there was a gentleman named Greenhouse who's going to testify next week when we come back, and we would raise an objection to his testimony because we believe it is double hearsay. We understand that a witness named Barnes would testify in the case that Susan said if anything happened, it was attributable to Bob. But this is a situation where this person can testify that Barnes told him that, and I'm presuming the state wants to introduce that double hearsay, and we're going on record now objecting to it.
So I'll need an offer of proof, not now, it's 12 o'clock, we're taking our break. Next time we have a break, if we finish the tape early, I'll hear you out, whether you could present it, okay?
Okay.
I'll hear you out then, not now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, recess.
Okay.